Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Bonjour. Assalamu alaikum. I know afternoon sessions are extremely challenging because you just had lunch, but you don't want to miss actually what's about to happen, because I have some very dynamic speakers from different parts of the world who's going to be joining me on stage shortly. Now, in the business of public speaking, afternoon is called actually the cemetery of public speakers. It almost looks like you're at the cemetery because when the voice is down, you get people start sleeping. So I'll make sure every now and then, if I sense a bit sleeping, I'm going to start singing some songs. So you can either wake up, maybe leave the room, but I used to do that actually in the past. There's a song that I love a lot. It's called, from Al-Iktissad, What a Wonderful World. I sing to myself, what a wonderful world. And when I sing that song, people actually tend to run away, but I'm glad you're still here. Africa is at a crossroad. A better political leadership, a better governance on the continent, a better business environment, but more importantly also a very young continent with a lot of young people. Our GDP is growing. Africa has just signed a free trade presenting lots of opportunity for investors from this part of the world. The good news is that Africa enjoys beautiful and strong ties with the Middle East. But the questions, are we doing business the right way? Are we doing the right businesses? Building Africa and the Middle East. And that is why it's going to be extremely important in this panel. We explore this opportunity, but also explore what can we do to make that business flow and grow faster. So in this panel, we're going to look at why, what, and how Africa and the Middle East can actually do business together. You don't have to listen to me because I have some great speakers joining me on stage, and I want you to put your hands together as I welcome my speakers on stage joining for a conversation. For Afro-Exim Bank, Solomon, and I have the minister also from the foreign minister from Egypt coming to join on stage. And I have my last speaker, who should be somewhere in the audience, who's going to join us at some point. Ahmed Lukis will join us. Ahmed, all right. I can see the photographer is more concerned about thinking about it. I'm not going to sit, I'm going to stand so we can get the energy flowing. All right. All right, so we got to get our picture and get the conversation going. Excellent. We got beautiful pictures, so you guys, gentlemen, have a seat. Let's have a conversation. I'm going to start with you, Solomon. I know you from a previous life. I've worked with you at IFC. You know Africa very well. This is a conference about doing business in the Middle East. We have an Africa section. Talk to me about why would anybody be interested from this part of the world in investing in Africa or doing business in? Go ahead.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Is the mic working? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. It's interesting that Ibrahima is asking me really what's attractive about Africa, but having sat through the sessions this morning, one of the things that has dawned on me is, for example, Lebanon has so many challenges itself, within Lebanon. You have the youth unemployment, you have the massive, displaced persons from Syria, and you have your own challenges here. And so I was thinking through, how do I get you excited about Africa, notwithstanding your challenges? So I'm not an expert on the Middle East. I'm not an expert on Lebanon. It's my first visit to Lebanon. But I made a few observations that I just want to bring to your attention. And please feel free to correct me if I don't make sense. But one of the things I heard was that for small and medium companies, access to markets is the biggest challenge. You have 22 markets in the Middle East, in MENA, with different customs, protocols, and different issues overall. and also fragmented and small markets. So just imagine if these markets, in the Middle East like Lebanon, could have access to the large markets in Africa like Nigeria. One stop, like Ethiopia. One stop. And I'll talk a little more about the growing urbanization, which is creating really fantastic cities that gives you access to large markets, almost immediately. But I think that's one of the reasons why, Lebanese companies should still think about, the Arab-Africa axis, South-South axis. A good friend of mine is here, Mr. Habib Jaffer, who's a Lebanese national, but also somebody who's doing fantastic business in Nigeria. The Lebanese diaspora contributes significantly to Lebanon's economy. Just imagine if you could actually scale that up by doing more in these African countries. Because one of the problems he has is borrowing locally in countries like Nigeria. I mean, you borrow really at equity returns. That doesn't make sense. So just imagine if some of the Lebanese banks could actually finance him from here, then the ability to actually make more money as an equity investor and a medium-sized corporate, in Africa or a market like Nigeria, and bring more money into the Lebanese economy to help solve, some of your challenges. Then the last point I want to make very quickly is the Gulf markets or the Middle Eastern markets are only so large. But for some businesses, for some large businesses, you need scale to be profitable. So a good example is insurance. I think most of you know about Saham Assurance. Yes? Saham? Did I pronounce it correctly? Okay. So Saham essentially covered 27 countries in the Middle East, but it wasn't really large enough to be able to do great insurance, but especially reinsurance. So essentially it combined with Sanlam of South Africa to create actually a one-stop shop, in the insurance and reinsurance space to be able to compete with the alliances of the world. So one of the reasons also for really South-South, combination is because of the potential to create a large footprint across Africa, including North Africa and also the Middle East, to be able to compete globally. So those are really just my quick observations as to why you should be open-minded to really the Arab-Africa economic potential, notwithstanding the challenges. But let me talk.
Go ahead.
Okay. But let me just talk briefly about what's attractive about Africa long term. So, second fastest, in aggregate, second fastest, growing region from a GDP perspective, second to only Asia. And, in terms of the non-oil producing countries, several of them are even having accelerated growth. So that's really the first reason to consider Africa. Second is really rapid urbanization and changing demographics, where you have a growing middle-income group. We're going to really have 15 cities that will control about 50% of the consumption expected. And these are cities really with populations above 5 million people each. So the ability to make money in a very efficient manner is going to really come from this process. And the McKinsey Institute estimates that this will create about $6 trillion of household consumption and business spending by 2025. So this is a key opportunity. Lastly, manufacturing is really underperforming. And when I say manufacturing in the context of Africa, I also mean food and beverage processing as well, because that's a key part of manufacturing in our markets. Underperforming significantly, but the good news is 3/4 of the growth potential is really local consumption. So the ability to actually deliver, good company services within these markets to just satisfy local demand, not exports, is really one of the most attractive opportunities. And since I see also a lot of investors here, if you want to make 3 to 4 times your money in 3 to 4 years, or if you want to have the 20 times money, like we did at IFC in Nigeria with MTN Nigeria, you're not going to find it in some of the markets here. You're not going to find it in some of the markets in Asia. You're going to find this opportunity for great financial return in sub-Saharan Africa.
All right, so Solomon, you made the case about why. You laid out some areas where there are opportunities. Let me now move on to a different perspective. Mahmoud Salah, you actually work for Afro-Exim Bank, which is based in Cairo. You look at opportunities every day. There's a free trade on the continent. Where do you see the opportunities?
Thank you very much. I can see a lot of...
Can you get closer to the microphone so we can hear you, please?
Hello? We can find a lot of opportunities in the continent, especially in the oil and gas sector, where it's about 85% of Africa's proven oil reserves is held in...
But when you say in oil and gas, what are the specific opportunities that will be interesting to this audience?
Yeah, especially the countries like Nigeria, Angola, have the 85% of the African oil reserves. And we have also recent discoveries of oil and natural gas in Chad, Uganda, Mozambique, Ghana, Tanzania, Cote d'Ivoire. And in the mineral sector, we can see South Africa remains one of the leading mining countries with the diversified mining sector, reserves in chrome, gold, manganese, and other minerals. We have also other African countries like Zambia with copper and cobalt, Niger, uranium, Botswana and DRC with diamond, and Guinea with bauxite. We have also a good opportunity in agro-processing. There is always an opportunity to invest in agriculture, in agro-processing in countries like Cote d'Ivoire for cocoa and Ghana, Zimbabwe for cotton, Tanzania for cashews. West Africa is facing booming oil palm sector. Also in service sector, we need to expand activities in liberalization of telecommunication subsector, and also some opportunities in tourism that will create a lot of investment.
Now, Mahdu, these are great opportunities. You're an institution that supports businesses to go to Africa. If I'm an Arab investor and I want to go to Africa and seize this opportunity, what can you do for me as an institution? How can you support me to go to Africa?
Okay. Afro-Exim Bank usually presents some support for the foreign investors. Because a lot of investors can see the investment opportunities. However, they don't know the market enough to try to go inside and explore. Therefore, we use various products to attract long to medium term investors to support capital and investment projects into Africa. We are utilizing various products of the bank, mainly guarantees to enable non-African countries to invest in some projects in Africa. We use our preferred creditor status in member states and investment grade credit rating, and vast experience and knowledge of the African market on the bank. We provide various type of guarantees like investment guarantees, country risk guarantee, LC confirmation guarantee, guarantees supporting African entities in bidding for large projects.
I am sure some investors would like to talk to you bilaterally after this conversation to see how they can access this product to do business in Africa. Let me now turn over to Chairman Ahmad Wakil. Chairman, you are the chairman of the Union of African Chambers of Commerce, Industry, and Agriculture. So you're very much interested in the particular sector. When you look at the continent, when you look at the sector you're involved in, where do you see the opportunities between Africa and the Arab world?
Good afternoon, Monsieur Cheikh Ibrahim. Comme je vous avais dit déjà, comme je suis un Africain et en même temps arabe, et je suis sur une terre arabe avec audience arabe, C'est pour cela que je dois parler en arabe.
Avec
Je
plaisir.
veux vous demander de
Je vous encourage.
ترجمة والله اللي هنا سمعتي monsieur Cheikh Ibrahim et monsieur. Ah, vous avez déjà vu.
I'll ask you to get your translators. Hopefully next time when I come back, my heart will be back to ask the question.
I have one for you.
Can I get a headset? Okay, let me have the headset since I have a broken arrow.
مساء الخير. دولة الرئيس، أصحاب المعالي، السادة الحضور، منصة كريمة، الحقيقة اسمحوا لي أن أتحدث إليكم النهاردة بصفتي رئيس الاتحاد الأفريقي للغرف التجارية والصناعية والزراعية والمهن الحرة، بيمثل عشرات الملايين من أفريقيا. وكعربي دايما احنا في الوطن العربي بنتكلم على الامن الغذائي وعلى الميه، وبنتكلم ايضا من مده طويله على التكامل الاقتصادي العربي، وبننافس بعض وبنعاني من منافسه في الوطن العربي للصناعات الناشئه كلها بيتحكم فيها دول اخرى، خاصة في مدخلاتها من المواد الخام والمواد الأولية، وبالتالي بتأثر على قدراتها التنافسية. كما الوطن العربي خسر ما يقرب من كذا مليار في البورصات العالمية منذ سبتمبر 2011. دي الحقيقة اللي بنعيشها كوطن عربي. طيب دعوني أن أطرح لكم الحل. من وجهة نظرنا الحل في كلمة واحدة أفريقيا، لأن التوجه القوي ناحية تنمية التبادل التجاري والاستثماري العربي الأفريقي يؤدي إلى تعظيم الاستفادة من الموارد الطبيعية والبشرية التي تزخر بها قارتنا السمراء إفريقيا. إفريقيا هي ثاني قارة في العالم من حيث عدد السكان ثم سكان العالم، بأعلى نسبة نمو للطبقة المتوسطة ذات قوة شرائية عالية، بها فيها 60% من الأراضي الصالحة للزراعة بثروة مائية ضخمة، نص مخزون العالم من البلاتينيوم، الكوبالت، الماس، زي ما قال زميلي 11% من إنتاج العالم من البترول، 6% من الغاز، 4% من الفحم. وصادرات أفريقيا تتجاوز 100 مليار دولار. للأسف أكثر من 85% من تلك الثروات مستغلة من مين؟ من الاتحاد الأوروبي وأمريكا والصين والهند. وبعدين نرجع احنا نشتري هذه بأضعاف أثمانها. لذلك الحقيقة لابد ان احنا نعيد ترتيب أوراقنا، نعيد ترتيب أفكارنا، لأن الوطن العربي استثمر بزيادة عن 23 مليار خارج الوطن العربي في 2017. يعني هذا الأمر بيخلي إجمالي استثماراته المتراكمة خارج الوطن العربي ب 14 تريليون دولار. فأنا أعتقد إن لابد إن التنمية من هنا ورايح تتجه إلى أفريقيا، وعشان تتجه إلى أفريقيا الحقيقة لازم نشترك مع بعض ومع حكوماتنا إن احنا نخلق آليات نقل جديدة ولوجستيات، زي مشروع اللي بنسمع عنه من زمان اسكندرية كيب تاون. احنا بنقترح في مصر الآن طريق جديد سفاجة دكار عشان يقدر يدخل على وسط أفريقيا، واحنا مش عايزين غير الدعم السياسي اللي يخليه القطاع الخاص يقدر يعمل مثل هذه الطرق واللوجستيات في بنظام البويتي. أنا عايز أقول الحقيقة إن قدامنا فرصة طيبة جدا. أفريقيا تمتلك كل شيء. أفريقيا فيها أكثر من مليار مستهلك. أفريقيا فيها فرص واعدة. أمريكا وأوروبا والصين بيسعوا بكل الطرق النهارده لاستثمارات جديدة، ونحن في الوطن العربي غائرون. احنا تأخرنا كتير، والمفروض ان يمضي قطار الحديث ونبتدي العمل بأفكار مرتبة، لأن كمان لازم نستغل ان احنا عندنا أكثر من 500,000 مواطن عربي بيعيش في أفريقيا كلها. لازم ان احنا وبيعملوا جزء منهم كبير بيعمل في التجارة والاستثمار. أعتقد أن الفرص الواعدة في المرحلة القادمة هي أفريقيا، ولابد أن احنا كوطن عربي نقعد مع بعض كلنا ونستطيع أن احنا نبني البنية التحتية اللي تسمح لنا بتصدير واستيراد منتجاتنا. انا مش عايز افكر في افريقيا كوطن عربي ان ابيع لها بس، دي تملك ثروات تزيد من قدراتنا التنافسيه.
Thank you. Thank you very much for not only laying out the opportunity, but also the solution to access them and the call for actions that you said. I'll come back to you and see exactly how do we move from there. Now, His Excellency Dr. Khaled Hanafi, you bring in a different perspective. First of all, you're a former Minister of Trade of Egypt, so you understand policy and business environment. But today, you're the Secretary General of the Union of Arab Chambers. You also bring in the business perspective. Now, we heard the African perspective. We had also the opportunities. From what you heard so far, if you focus on the opportunities, how do you see them from your own perspective?
Of course, as mentioned by many of the previous speakers, that there are great opportunities, but those opportunities are conditional. We cannot just say that opportunities are over there because Africa has the raw material, Africa has a rate of development, high rate of growth. All these things might not guarantee a real opportunity. The opportunity is in the synergy, actually. And from my point of view, we should not keep talking about trade like exports and imports. What we need to talk about is strategic alliance. The idea is totally different, and we should not keep looking to the back. We should look forward as by utilizing the fourth industrial revolution, the IoT, the augmented reality, all these elements that might enable us to benefit from the scattered competitive advantage in each region, whether in Africa or in the Arab region or in both, and make a sort of aggregation based on the technology. And the technology here could be the technology of managing the supply chain, because at this age we cannot keep talking about a final product made in. There is nothing like made in now. In our era, the benefit and the competitive advantage based on the consolidation of the production among different regions and utilizing the benefit from each entity. Also, when we talk about Africa, the market in Africa is very narrow, it's very limited. So benefiting from African markets is not function of the size of population in these countries, but it should be function of the income. And the income won't be generated unless we have some value-added activities. And the value-added activities should target a third region. So from my point of view, that we can make a sort of hub in Africa through the Arab region to the rest of the world. If you look at the political economy, if you look at the trade war started in America and China now, And we consider that there should be a sort of change in the trade trends from one area to another. Now we have a great opportunity. We have a great opportunity to get allied with our neighbors in the European Union. We here means the Arab and the African countries. We can get allied with the neighbors in Europe. We can get allied with the neighbors, or actually the friends in India, in China. So in this context, we might be talking about a different model for strategic alliance that benefiting from the existing human resources that exist, benefiting from some of the relatively low cost of production, the relatively low unit labor cost in some issues, and the logistics. The logistics here should be the name of the game.
Exactly. Well, let's try to innovate a little bit. That's actually, because one of the things I noticed in this panel, you don't talk to each other. So I'm going to actually make that happen. So Honorable Minister, I'm going to turn over to you. Do you have a question for Solomon, for example, to answer? And then I'll go to the rest of us. What's your question to him?
Actually, the question here is that when we talk about highlighting the opportunities, we need to think of not just the opportunity in each region, in each country, but we need to think of the synergy, how we can benefit from the synergy among the different countries, how we can benefit from the location, from the geography, not just from the population or just the low cost of some material.
Excellent. So what's your answer to the question of the Minister?
No, so Minister, I do agree with you. We're not regionally integrated between the Arab countries and sub-Saharan Africa, or let's say Africa as a whole. But there's a prelude to such integration, which is the strategic alliance that you've been talking about. That's the prelude. So we have to really look at what are our common strengths, within these two regions. I spend a lot of time attracting South-South investments, for example, from China into Africa. But that tends to be focused really on areas in which China is, at a competitive advantage, which would tend to be infrastructure, and then also, oil and gas beneficiation. Okay. But when we take a look at our contiguous markets, that's between the Middle East and Africa, and we take a look at really our core competencies between the two markets, I see the opportunity as more based on the local demand, not necessarily exports to the EU, okay? I mean, that's another area that we can work towards, but we need to skill up better, okay? We need to have the right trade agreements. And this is an era where, trade busting agreements is the order of the day from a president that would remain nameless. So when I'm looking at things pragmatically, in other words, tomorrow, what are the sorts of things that we could do? It's more in this whole sphere of consumer products and services. So that's why it's financial services, that's why it's FMCG, okay? That's why it's also even healthcare. Because once again, we can actually exchange and learn, and then we can take advantage of the fact that we have contiguous markets.
All right, now, Solomon, it's your turn. What's your question to Afro-Exim Bank? What would you like to ask him?
So I heard a lot about, all the ways in which you can help support South-South investments. But I worked for a DFI for a long time, the IFC. I just wanted to understand how you're incentivized to really look at supporting South-South, because my recollection is that in most DFIs, we are structured to deliver investments into the markets we cover. So if you work in the Middle East, you're structured to really deliver investments into the Middle East. But we weren't structured to actually harness interest by Middle Eastern companies to expand to other regions. So I just want to better understand how Afro-Exim is structured to be able to support South-South investments between Arab and African countries.
Okay. Actually, we've been working on this for a long time. This question is good because it will make me share one experience with you. We've been involved with the ITFC, who is a member of the IDB group, as well as Badia. and we were part of the launch of the Arab African Trade Bridges Program, which is mainly done to boost the effort of Afro-Arab cooperation in general, by providing solutions for investment, providing information, improve the export marketing skills in African countries, provide advisory services, and so on. So we are working all the time to try to boost this relationship.
Mahmoud, what's your question to Chairman Wakil?
So,
I know I am putting you on the spot, but I want you to talk to each other, because most panels don't talk. Go ahead, what's your question to Chairman?
So how can we unify the efforts, like the initiative I just spoke about?
يعني let me to tell you really إن احنا عندنا مشكلة كبيرة الحقيقة في أفريقيا. يعني إكزيم البنك لازم يتعامل من خلال البنوك الوطنية. إحنا ما عندناش مراسلين من بنوكنا وبنوك أفريقيا أصلا. إحنا عندنا مشكلة إن أنا في أفريقيا أما أحب أروح السنغال دكار عند الشيخ إبراهيم لازم أروح عن طريق باريس، في حين إن في دول عندها الفيجن إنها تستفيد من أفريقيا وتفيد أفريقيا. عندها النهارده أكثر من 44 رحلة طيران من اسطنبول على سبيل المثال لكل أفريقيا. ما عندناش تأمين، ما عندناش كلام. فهي الفكرة كلها لازم أنا في تصوري الشخصي إن لازم السياسيين في الوطن العربي يقتنعوا إن المستقبل لهم هو أن يكون الشريك التجاري والاستثماري الأول هي أفريقيا. بناء على هذا الأمر البرايفت سيكتور هيتحرك، لأن أفريقيا ذاتها إنها نتيجة لظروف تواجدها على مر التاريخ لا تزال بكر ولا تزال الخبرة فيها أقل. فأنا أعتقد إن احنا لازم يكون في إرادة سياسية مع إرادة القطاع الخاص. لازم الإرادة السياسية ترى المنظور وقيمة أفريقيا الحقيقية بالنسبة للتعاون المستقبلي معها. بناء على كده يعني عندنا على سبيل المثال اللي قامت بيها المغرب الآن في توجهها وخاصة مع دول الإمواء في جانب الغرب أفريقيا بتحرك سياسي من الملك مع مجموعات من رجال الأعمال. أنا كل ما أروح حتة هناك عملوا خط طيران، عملوا بنوك، بنك وفا على طول اشتغل، نمرة 2 شركات تأمين، كلام من ده. عملوا البنية التحتية لعلاقات التجارية متوازنة. أنا أعتقد إن إحنا محتاجين كلنا إن نعرف قيمة أفريقيا جدا خلال المرحلة القادمة.
Thank you very much. Can you give a big round of applause to my speakers for actually self-monitoring themselves? Now, we're going to open up the floor and get some questions or comments from the audience. So if you can get a microphone to go around, just if you could just make your comment as brief as possible so we can go back to our speakers. Go ahead. If you could state your name and your institution so we know who you are.
My name is Robert Shirzak. I'm a retired banker. I have a couple of questions for all your colleagues.
A couple of questions?
Yes.
Okay.
You spoke about banking, Lebanese banking lending in Africa. Unfortunately, as you may or may not know, Lebanese banks are in pretty tight shape. So I don't think they will be lending very soon in Africa. However, Lebanese banks would be very interested, I think, to go into joint venture in Africa, yes. And the problem is that, do you have is there in Africa sufficient, other than South Africa, banks of the size and of the strength for wanting to go into joint venture with Arab institutions, not only Lebanese institutions? I believe in the South-South dialogue, not South-North-South. When I was working at a bank, I made a joint venture with China, an Arab bank, and we created a joint venture in Hong Kong. It was very, very successful because it was an Arab-Chinese joint venture. So I think that rather than talk about Lebanese banks, we should think as Africans. We should consider Arab joint ventures. There aren't enough of them. They're not at all, any one of them. Second point is the image creation. Africa has a problem of image. Immigration in Europe, very bad image. Education, very low, I think, level of education. Corruption. So there is an image building somehow. The heads of states of Africa should do their homework. It's not only for the Arabs to go and say, yeah, we want to invest, we want to cooperate because you have 10% of that, 200% of this. I think that Africa should do a small effort into putting itself together.
Thank you. Very good point. On the left side there. And I'll come back to you afterwards. Go ahead.
Hello, good evening. My name is Habib Jafar, and I'm a little bit familiar with the Nigerian economy since I work there. You know, I'd like just to overstate what Mr. Solomon has said about the potentials and of investing in Africa. You know, the easiest way to approach it, if people are interested to make 10%, 5% profit, yeah, they can stay where they are. Europe, America maybe, you can make 10% and you'll be happy. But if you are looking to make 50%, if you are looking to double that, I think Nigeria, Africa is the potential. I would like to share with you the story of one bank in Nigeria called Guarantee Trust Bank, whose total assets is around $10 billion, similar to many Lebanese banks here. That same Lebanese bank, I'm not going to name the name, with $10 billion, are making a profit of almost $150 million plus or minus. That same bank in Guarantee Trust Bank is making $600 million. The issue is how did they do it? Because the market is big and because they used the proper modalities in technology and everything. Coupled, correct, there's corruption, correct, there is inefficiency, but this is, it's a whole package. You can't take one and choose another. Thank you very much.
Good point. Let's get another contribution here. So let me get my headset so I can understand.
محمود دياب نائب رئيس تحرير الأهرام للقسم الاقتصادي.
Only 1 second. Let me.
محمود دياب نائب رئيس تحرير الأهرام للقسم الاقتصادي. أنا عاوز أقول ملحوظة، يعني أنا صحفي داخل على 30 سنة. حضرت مؤتمرات وندوات سواء اقتصادية أو غير اقتصادية، وبتطرح فيها المشاكل وبتطرح فيها الحلول، وفي الآخر التوصيات وبتتركن. طالما احنا عندنا المشاكل معروفة، حلولها معروفة، ليه ما توضعش آلية تنفذ كل ما يتم طرحه في أي مؤتمر؟ احنا بقالنا سنين بنتكلم وبنطرح الحلول، بنستعرض المشاكل، لكن إيه بعد كده؟ مفيش للأسف. وشكرا.
All right, I'll come back to it. Can we get another point? It's here on the back here.
Thank you. Maybe it's more a comment than a question. What was raised actually by our eminent speaker was the absence of direct funding by DFIs to Africa. Actually, the modus operandi today of most DFIs is that they work through two-step loans. So basically, it is a loan availed by local banks where the preferential interest rate or spread or tenure or whatever is financed by the DFI. So any foreign investor, whatever his nationality, once they open shop in a country, they become a local company, hence eligible to these. We've done our last survey about the available funding for doing business in Africa, and there is $56 billion annually by DFIs, multilateral, bilateral, from Mexican aid to Australian aid and everything in between. And all this is available for whoever wants to do business. The point is, the opportunity is there, the funding is there, the interest is there. However, there is a huge lack of information about the opportunities, how to do it, and unfortunately, you've been working in IFC as a DFI. How many people know that there is something called IFC for a start in a given country? How many people know about the instruments of IFC for private sector? And set aside, how many people know where to go, how to access that funds that's available? I think it's a matter of awareness, and here is where the Union of Arab Chambers can have a huge role, along with the Union of African Chambers, doing various activities and events, disseminating the message.
Excellent. One last point, is right here in front.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity. Mohammed Fal from Saudi Arabia. I'm thinking just to second the point as far as image is concerned. I think Africa needs to work very hard to improve their image in the Arab countries. This is the big issue that without working on that, I don't see any strategic plan can be tackled. The second issue is the regulations in Africa. The regulation in Africa needs also to be engineered or modified and promoted outside.
Good point. Now, one of the things I do when I moderate, I try to see if I remember all the questions. And so let's see if you remember them. So question number one was, what are the opportunities in terms of joint ventures in the banking sector? Question number two was that how Africa can get over this sort of branding and image problem that we have. Point number three is that we can have double-digit return on the continent, so it's very attractive because of the business. Question number four was that how do we actually talk the talk and walk the walk, not just have another conference, and get to some actions. Number five was that opportunities are there, but the question is the informations are not known to those who invest in the continent. And last but not least, there's an issue about the branding as well. And the last point, how do we actually have regulations for conditions doing business? Do we capture all the questions and points? I think we did. Let me turn back to you, Solomon. You got a couple of questions, and I'll go to the other speakers as well.
So I'd like to go back. I believe it was Mr. Schuster who was advocating joint ventures between Arab banks and African banks. Mr. Habib gave a good example of one bank that is my client, Guarantee Trust Bank. They're a regional bank. They're in East Africa. They're in West Africa. They're not in South Africa. And they will be very interested in joint ventures where it makes sense. So that's an example of one bank. There's another bank, ETI, which is in, I think, about 34 African countries. IFC is heavily invested in it. That would be another example, really, of a good bank to joint venture with. But don't forget, I gave you the example of Saham of Morocco, combining with Sanlam of South Africa. That goes to even show you that M&A opportunities are also available. But I want to go back very quickly to what I'd said earlier about lending to Lebanese companies that are operating in Africa. And I'll give you a very good example in Asia. Olam. Olam is the biggest aggregator in agriculture in the world. All its business is in Africa. Yes, it's doing a little bit in Latin America, but it's primarily Africa. A lot of its lending is not in Africa. A lot of its lending is in the Singaporean market, where it gets corporate facilities to be able to continue to grow its business in Africa. So that is really what I was alluding to when I said, you should look to support, Lebanese companies. You also spoke about, the lack of awareness of opportunities by IFC or the lack of awareness by business people about what IFC can do. I've left IFC. I'm now looking to scale up on how I can support South-South in a very programmatic way. But I don't want to be apologetic for IFC because IFC has actually done a fantastic job in resolving the points that you've raised. They have a presence in markets in about 28 countries. And part of the reason they decentralized and put people on the ground and they hired people from within that country, in addition to the culture carriers that came, let's say, from Washington or from Joburg, etc., was to really penetrate, those local markets, understand what the needs are, and make sure that there's great awareness of really what IFC can deliver, which also includes equity, quasi-equity, and not just debt financing. So there's still an opportunity to remedy that. If I give you my example in Nigeria, where I was country manager, in 2006, we were doing $150 million a year. When I left in 2012, we were doing $1.5 billion a year of investments. So that goes to show you really that once you learn the market, once you're in the market, once you make yourself useful, yes, sometimes you'll say no, you will grow the business and address the awareness issue.
All right, now, Honorable Minister, let me turn it over to you. There's a question about the brand, the image of Africa in the Arab world. What can we do to actually improve the brand? Because it seems to me there's more kind of a perception as opposed to reality sometimes. How do we improve the brand?
Actually, branding is very important, and making the right positioning strategy for the concept itself is really missing in most of the cases. And unifying and making actually the proper communication strategy, as mentioned in question number 5 that you listed, is very important really, because the positioning here made some stereotyping for some issues related to the business in Africa, or the business between Africa and the Arab region, or the business in general and the business environment in general. And I insist on saying business, not just trade. So what needed here is to sit together and to set a communication strategy, a proper communication strategy. In this case, we have to formulate a certain positioning, accordingly a certain message format, and to be able to work on delivering this message everywhere. Because in the absence of this, the efforts are very fragmented, and we might think of an individual or individual efforts that might be okay, but when it comes to the aggregate vision, it's not like this at all. And we're going to keep saying the same things, as mentioned in question number 4, that repeating the same issues every time while not reaching results, because we do not have a roadmap, a clear roadmap under a specific positioning strategy to be followed.
Now, let me just push you a little bit on the branding issue. I mean, what else could we do differently to change the perception of Africa in the Arab world? I mean, one thing is to have a forum. Do we need to get more success stories on television? Do we need to have more roadshow of Africans across the Arab world telling their stories? Specifically, what can we do to change the perception?
We need harmonization. We need to sit together and settle what we need to do, because if you ask every single country or every single entity about the strategy or the vision, you are going to receive number of visions equal the number of organizations or countries. So in this case, you don't have anything to do. You have fragmented effort that will never lead to anything.
Absolutely. Now, Chairman Wakil, let me turn over to you. You look at Africa.
So, if I could interrupt for a second.
On the branding side?
On the branding side. Because I have a burning issue.
Quickly, yes.
So, when I sat through the meetings today, for example, even the IMF presentation about Act Now, I thought I was in any other African country with the same issues on accountability, corruption, poor regulation, etc. So when we talk about Arab-Africa collaboration, let's just say that our issues are similar. And we've learned to do business notwithstanding those issues. And I think that's the way we should actually look at the collaboration opportunity.
Yeah, so while we're fixing the problem, we can still do business together. So you're saying. Chairman Wakil, a couple of questions for you on the brand Africa.
No, I don't have anything to add it, but let me to tell you that Africa really is the land of opportunities. Therefore, I invite you to go to Africa, anywhere to Africa, and see by your eyes, you will have a lot of opportunities there. Thank you.
Absolutely. So seeing is believing. Go to Africa, see the opportunities, and make your own mind. Mahmoud, do you have anything to add before we wrap up?
There was a comment about the banks in Africa and the presence of the banks. From my point of view, there is a lot of banks. It's a lack of information. There is a lot of European banks, I will not make advertisement, present especially in West Africa, in Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal. It's a matter of knowledge and choosing the correct partner, either on the ground or the partner who will introduce you to the correct banks in Africa.
Excellent. Now let's wrap up by getting your takeaway. So Solomon, what would be your takeaway from this conversation? One strong message that you want to get across. What would it be?
Strong similarities between the two markets, in the Middle East, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. We have the ability to leverage those strong similarities to collaborate in a win-win manner. Let's action that instead of looking for perfection.
All right, Honorable Minister, what will be your takeaway or message?
Actually, the message again is the strategic alliance, that we should not keep talking about trade or investment. We should think of strategic orientation that we should work on, specifically when we capitalize on the challenges that we face that could be converted to opportunities. Because if you're talking about unemployment in Africa, from my point of view, this means poverty. For this, I believe this will be different.
Excellent. Thank you. Chairman Wakul, what would be your message?
I don't have anything to add. As I told you, Africa really it's the land of opportunity.
Absolutely. So, Mahmoud, what would be your message for the?
My message is that investors who intend to invest in Africa should.
We have number 2, strategic alliance. In addition to trade and investment, let's see how we can strategically team up as two parties. As the chairman worker say, Africa is a place to be. It's a place to do business. And last but not least, let's look at long term as opposed to short term on the continent. Can you join me and give a round of applause to our speakers? Thank you very much. Well done. Well done. Merci. Thank you. Merci.